Halo semua, selamat siang para pecinta kopi dan selamat datang di acara Taste of Australia Coffee Masterclass bersama ONA Coffee. Nama saya Emma dari Kedubes Australia di Jakarta. Nah, orang Indonesia dan Australia sama-sama menyukai kopi. Dan setiap hari di kafe di seluruh Australia dan Indonesia ada kopi terbaik di dunia yang sedang dibuat. Nah, apakah kamu ingin menikmati kopi berkualitas kafe tanpa harus pergi dari rumah? Hari ini kita akan ikuti barista ONA Coffee dari Australia. Saat ini, Hugh Kelly akan digantikan oleh barista Fabian Fritz. Hani Ezat dan Fabian Fritz dari ONA Coffee di Australia akan menyiapkan kopi filter enak dan berbagi tips dan teknik terbaik buat kalian di rumah. Sebelum kita bertemu dengan Hani dan Fabian, saya ingin mengucapkan selamat kepada semua peracik kopi dari rumah yang mengembangkan paket biji kopi ONA Coffee dan Kedubes Australia Jakarta dari giveaway peracik kopi di rumah yang diadakan oleh ABCD Coffee School. Kamu bisa bergabung dengan Hani dan Fabian untuk membuat kopi dengan biji kopi itu. Terima kasih untuk partner kami, ONA Coffee dan ABCD Coffee School yang mempromosikan acara ini. Buat kamu yang belum dapat paket kopi bayarnya, jangan khawatir karena kami masih punya paket biji kopi ONA Coffee dan Kedubes Australia Jakarta untuk hadiah. Caranya cuma dengan jawab pertanyaan berikut ini di kolom komentar. Oke, siap? Pertanyaan pertama adalah, dari kota mana di Australia ONA Coffee pertama kali berdiri? Ada petunjuk. Kota ini adalah ibu kota Australia. Oke, pertanyaan kedua. Jenis kopi susu apakah yang diciptakan di Australia? Oke, jawab pertanyaan tadi di kolom komentar. Kami akan memilih 5 pemenang yang berlokasi di Indonesia dan pemenangnya akan diumumkan setelah acara masterclass ini. Selama masterclass ini, Hani dan Fabian siap menjawab pertanyaan kamu tentang kopi. Jangan lupa tulis pertanyaannya di kolom komentar ya. Beberapa peannya yang beruntung juga akan mendapatkan paket biji kopi ONA Coffee dan Kedubes Australia Jakarta. Oke, sekarang yuk kita mulai Taste of Australia Coffee Masterclass bersama Hani dan Fabian dari ONA Coffee.
Ready to go?
Hi Fabian.
Hey everybody.
Hey guys, how are you going?
My name's Hani. This is Fabian.
My name is Fabian. How are you going?
What we're going to be doing today is running you through how we like to make filter coffee here in Canberra. I look after accounts and sales in Canberra and Queensland in Australia, and Fabian looks after our training department with Hugh. What we're going to be doing today is running you through 2 types of brewing methods that we use here in Canberra. Just to give you a little bit of background on ONA, founded by Geisha Coffee, the World Barista Champion in 2015. We are spread across Australia and internationally, and yeah, we really love what we do. We love coffee, but we're going to get started. So we're going to start off with what is a filter coffee. Filter coffee is kind of when I like to explain to people for the first time, I like to say it's quite similar to tea. It's quite light in body, but has a lot of complexity, different flavors. And it's usually not enjoyed with milk, but you can if you like. But we're going to show you today is how we like to do it. First thing I need to introduce is the biggest difference between espresso and filter coffee is going to be like the total dissolved solids, so the solubility of the coffee. You can use espresso roasted coffee for filter, however it might not give you as many complex or lighter flavors that you might usually enjoy in a filter coffee. So what we're going to be using is filter coffee today, and that's what we're going to be giving away for you guys as well. Something that's really different with filter coffee as well is we use a completely different grind size. So the grind size is a lot coarser. If we're going to talk in just general terms, it's quite medium to coarse. And if we want to, there's a grinder here called Comandante. We're sitting anywhere between 20 to 30 clicks. And if you're using like an EK grinder, if you're looking at a clock, It's going to be quite similar to about 5 to 6 o'clock on the clock, so facing down where the arrow is, if you know what an EK is. If not, totally cool. There's two types of filter coffee. There's immersion and then there's drip. I'm going to be introducing drip coffee and Fabian's going to be introducing immersion. And also feel free at any time to chuck some questions through. We'll be happy to answer all of them at the end. And I'll pass this off to Fabian now. He will introduce what he's doing and his equipment.
Hey guys, so I'm Fabian, responsible to run the trainings, the barista trainings here in ONA, Canberra. So basically we picked a very popular way to make coffee. So we have two very popular immersion brewers, the French press and the Aeropress. So immersion brewer, which kind of brewer is that? So immersion brewer is pretty much when you leave the ground coffee in contact with the water, kind of like brewing tea, for example. So you let it brew for a period of time, and after you strain and filter that coffee. So today I'm going to show the Aeropress method. So that was pretty much my first contact with, I would say, black coffee, with filtered coffee, was the Aeropress. It's approachable, you can replicate, and it's very consistent, and there is so many different recipes that you can play with. So I'm going to show the way that I normally brew my Aeropress. So here I have in my hand grinder the Comandante. I ground 20 grams of my filtered coffee. I choose this coffee from Kenya, natural process. This coffee is very nice. It has this kind of fruit quality like black currant, it's floral as well, kind of purple and white florals. That's the kind of coffee that I like the most, but between Kenyan and Ethiopian. So here I have my ground coffee. So I have 20 grams of ground coffee here, and I'm going to use my Aeropress. So we have basically two different ways to brew Aeropress. One is the normal method, where the filter face to the bottom, or the inverted method, which pretty much you close the brew chamber with the piston, like upside down. Okay, so that creates kind of like a closed brew environment. So I have in my kettle here water to 88 degrees Celsius. So temperature is very important as well. What's happening if you make, for example, an immersion brewer using boiling water, which is roughly 100 degrees Celsius? That water is going to be too hot to brew that coffee. So what do you mean too hot? The power of the extraction of that water is going to be too intense. It's going to be too strong. So most likely what's going to happen with your coffee, you're going to over extract that coffee. So that coffee is going to taste like bitter, heavy, this kind of flavors that we don't like our coffee. We like coffee vibrant, sweet, with those kind of beautiful fruit qualities.
So if we don't have a kettle with a temperature probe on it, what do you suggest we do, Fabian?
Yeah, good question, honey. What I would suggest, go to your kettle, full boil, so 100 degrees, and wait around like 2 minutes. So your water is going to cool down a little bit toward those 90 to 85 degrees Celsius, which is pretty much good temperature for this technique. Okay, so I have my 20 grams of ground coffee. I'm going to transfer to my Aeropress. And we're going to use one scale. Scale is one of our best friends, because as soon as we lock that recipe, we can replicate over and over. So you can always try and experiment different recipes and try to find which recipe will suit your taste. It's everything about preference as well, okay guys? Some people like more like strong coffee, some people like more like diluted version. I'll say a filtered coffee goes towards more like that diluted version. But at the same time, you have all that flavor of spectrum, very open. So you can taste the whole complexity of the coffee. And in my opinion, that's the best way to appreciate the coffee. It's pretty much the pure expression of the coffee. It's the coffee talking by itself. So I have my scale, I set back to 0, and I'm gonna use 220 grams of 88 degrees water, okay? And at the same time that I start to add the water on my coffee, I'm gonna start my timer. Timing is very important too. So depending how long is the contact time between coffee and water, you will extract that coffee. If that time is too quick, I'll say 30 seconds for example, you won't be capable to extract that coffee. It's gonna taste a little bit sour, a little bit sharp. And on the other hand, if you extract that coffee for example, 5-10 minutes, it's gonna be too long. that coffee will be over-extracted, it will taste bitter and heavy. So for this brew, I'm gonna leave the coffee in contact with the water. Total brew time, 1.5 minutes. So first, I'm gonna add those 220 grams of water. I'm gonna start my timer at the same time. So I just keep checking my scale. After I see those 220 grams of water, okay? I'm gonna grab that pedal who comes with the Aeropress. I'm gonna agitate for 30 seconds, okay? That's pretty much catalyzing the whole extraction, pretty much accelerating that extraction power of the water, okay? What's good about this method, all the coffee grounds are saturated with water, so you're extracting all of them at the same time. After 30 seconds, I'm gonna remove my pedal. I'm gonna grab my paper filter. I'm gonna rinse that paper. To remove that papery flavor, I'm gonna place the lid on top of my Aeropress. Make sure that's nice and tight, in place. I'm gonna grab my favorite mug. I'm gonna grab my Aeropress mug upside down, and I'm gonna flip. I recommend this flip a little bit quick, but try to keep everything in place, okay? Otherwise you leave a mess.
Got to step back.
So after 1 minute, you start to press. Some baristas, they press like that. Some people like to press with the elbow. I'm gonna go a little bit fancy, I'm gonna press like that. So I'm gonna start that 1 minute mark. I'm gonna finish towards that 1 minute and 30, 1 minute 45 max. So I'm reaching that's 1 minute and 40, 1 minute 45. And it's that kind of whistling sound. Pretty much you stop that process. You remove your Aeropress, and you have your coffee ready to be drink. So this technique is very good, and to be honest, it's a very affordable way to make coffee. In general, the price of the Aeropress compared with another like brew equipment is kind of for the cheap side. And at the same time, you can carry everywhere. It's plastic. You can check in your backpack, go for a hike, bring your little stove, your gas stove, boil some water, put down a little bit, and you can make your Aeropress. And basically after, you just have to enjoy.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Fabio.
Actually not bad, man. It's very tasty.
Nice. Awesome. So another really good point about immersion brewing as well, you're always going to find they have a lot more body and a lot more texture just because they are going through that immersion method and actually getting a lot of pressure. So you'll usually find they'll have a lot more texture, but maybe not as much clarity. What we're going to move on to now is the drip method, which personally for me is my favorite. The reason I like this is kind of like my first introduction to specialty coffee was through a filter coffee, and I remember tasting flavors like strawberries and Turkish Delight, which were for me just, I couldn't believe that just coffee and water could taste like that. The method I'm using today, it's called a V60, it's from Hario. As you can see here, it's a metal one. It's matte black. You can get all different kinds of materials, and what they're going to do is change kind of their heat retention, which will in turn actually affect the coffee. I like the metal. It kind of boosts vibrancy and a little bit more of that acidity side of things. So I kind of really like to taste the complexity of the coffee. So I found that the metal filter just gives me the best option. As you can see, there's a white piece of paper in here, which is the paper filter, and hence the word filter coffee. Usually that means it's because it's going through a filter. I just use the Hario V60, and I use the 1 cup. This is a 2-cup brewer. The reason I use a 1 cup is because it sticks to the walls a little bit better. If you have only 2 cups or even larger, you can cut them as well. It just helps it stick to the brew, and it tastes a little bit better. Now, V60, it means 60 degrees. The coffee, this angle is a 60-degree angle. And basically it has grooves to help the brew bed draw down evenly around the thing. You need a carafe, you need the V60, you need the paper. I've already pre-wet it, and that's all I usually do. I pretty much fill it up with a jug of water, and I just allow it all to stick to the walls and make sure it's nice and stuck all around. The coffee I'm using today, I'm using a Costa Rica coffee. It is a Geisha, it's washed. Geisha is the varietal coffee, so if you think about wine, think about your Shiraz, etc. basically different varietals of coffee will give you different qualities. Geisha's quite a well-known varietal in specialty coffee and a well sought after. It's usually quite high grown, it's usually quite expensive. My favorite part about Geishas is their like unique florality and delicate acidity. These coffees are always super cool and super intense. Yeah, some of my favorite coffees are actually Geishas. But yeah, hopefully we're giving away some of them today. If not, you're going to have to find some. The brew ratio I'm using today is a 1 to 15 ratio. So 1 gram of coffee to 15 mils of water. I'm starting with 20 grams. So if we times that by 15, which is the 1 to 15 ratio, it's going to equal 300. So 20 grams of coffee, 300 mils of water. How am I going to apply that? We're going to do it over 5 pours. And this is what we like to do here at ONA. It's inspired by Tetsu. He is a World Brewers Cup champion based in Japan. And basically, we're going to be splitting it over 5 pours. In the first stage, we're going to be balancing the sweetness and acidity with 2 even pours, and then getting the body with the final 3 pours. It's going to be super straightforward and simple. We're going to be adding 60 grams every 30 seconds, 5 times. So 60 times 5 equals 300, just to kind of put the numbers in your head. The temperature I'm using is 93 degrees. Now, temperature is important when brewing coffee. It's kind of giving you that brew power, right? So if you need to extract more from the coffee, you usually go a little bit hotter. Less you go, if you want to extract less, you can go less temperature. This isn't directly tied to extraction, but it is something you can play with. And again, if you don't have the kettle with the temp pro, play with maybe even waiting 1 minute off boil versus 2 minutes. I think there's some really cool variables in between that you can play with. Grind size is another thing. If you want more body out of your coffees, I'd usually go a little bit finer. If you want a little bit more complexity, acidity, more flavor out of the coffee, I'd be pushing more towards that coarse grind size. Again, this one is ground pretty coarse. I would say the drawdown time after putting it on a pour over sits about 30 seconds. Like it will fully drain that 60 grams over 30 seconds quite fast. So I'm going to get into it. I pretty much apply the 20 grams of coffee directly in the middle. I don't really agitate it or anything. I just leave it nice and easy. Going to purge this. Now, you doing a pour over, what we want to aim to do is get as close to 60 grams as we can. It can become quite difficult if you've never done it before. Again, you don't need this gooseneck kettle. You can pour it into a jug. You can pour it into a takeaway cup and fold it. You can do so many different things, even a milk jug. Yeah, there's so many different ways that we can do this. Oh, we just dropped out, but I think we're back. Are we back? Awesome. Lucky I haven't started. So I'm going to show you with my finger kind of what the stream's going to look like on the brew bed. So if I start in the middle, and then I'm going to go around the outside, 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to come back into the middle and finish off. So hopefully you can kind of see that through here. And I'm going to just apply the first 60 grams, and I put the timer on at the same time. 3, going back in the middle. So the first pour is where we're going to balance that acidity. First and second pour are going to balance acidity and acidity and sweetness. So if you want more sweetness out of your coffee, you're going to do a shorter first bloom. So what that would mean is doing 50 grams instead of 60, and then applying the extra 70 on top to enhance that sweetness. So we're at 30 seconds now. I'm going to apply the next 60 grams of coffee, which is going to make the scale read 120. Now, in the second stage of the brew, which will be the final 3 pours, is where we're going to determine the body. If you want more body out of your filter, you're going to do some more pours. So maybe instead of doing 3 60-gram pours, you do 4 45-gram pours, I'm pretty sure. You're going to have to do the math on that. I'm probably wrong. I usually just do 3 because that's what works out for me. We're at a minute again. I'm going to apply that extra 60 grams. 1, 2, 3, and then I come back in the middle. And now I'm sitting at 180. It's a really easy way to brew because you're kind of just pouring 60 grams every 30 seconds. But again, compared to maybe an Aeropress, if you're on the run all the time, it does take a little bit longer, right? We're almost at a minute 30, so Fabian's Aeropress is already done and he's sipping. But what I enjoy from a drip coffee, what I enjoy from V60 compared to an Aeropress is just really that clarity you get from the coffee. you really do get a true representation of the character, maybe the terroir, where it's from, the process, and basically you really I just enjoy it because it's so easy to drink and it's really easy to share, right? So coming out of a carafe, you know, you can't really share milk coffees and espressos around. So this is a really easy way to, you know, make coffee without even having all of this really expensive equipment. Now the original outlay for certain coffees and certain equipment may be expensive, but I think I haven't really turned back since I started making V60s at home. I haven't really wanted to get any other machines. Now the fourth pour was taking me to 240 grams of coffee. Now the final pour, which I've already added at 2 minutes, is left me with 300. So this pour over is about to finish. Average brew time should sit between 2 minutes 20 and 2 minutes 40. If it's any longer or shorter, play around with your flow rate of the kettle, like how much you're actually adding. You should be aiming for about anywhere between 50 grams of water to 70 grams of water every 10 seconds. So if you can put a timer and then start pouring, you'll know what your flow rate is after 10 seconds, how much water you've actually poured. That's if you have a scale. If not, just play with the height difference and play with the flow rate, and you'll eventually get that grind size and flow rate down that you can get that brew time of 2 minutes 20 to 240. If it's too fine, obviously the brew's going to choke up and you're going to have a really slow brew, resulting in over extraction because there's more contact time with the water. Basically the coffee ground's just getting smashed by really for a longer period of time with water, and vice versa. If it's too quick, you're not going to get enough out of the coffee, which is going to result in maybe watery, soury, or nutty. But yeah, there's obviously so many variables you've got to get right when brewing filter coffee. But the best advice I would give anyone at home, beginning, is just start one thing at a time, right? So maybe you just do your 60 gram pours 5 times, or maybe you have an Aeropress like Fabian, and all you're going to do is really just take it one step at a time and play with one variable at a time. If you start playing around with too many things, what's going to happen is you're going to get a little bit lost. I find myself doing that all the time. You kind of get stuck in a big rabbit hole, and then you're kind of in the middle of nowhere. So that's pretty much it. You take this bad boy off, you put it on your little holder. This is done, you don't need it anymore. And you have a really nice filter coffee ready to go. And what I really like to do before I get into it is I give it a really nice swell, and then I sniff it. This one smells amazing. This Costa Rican really just reeks of like really nice, delicate orange mandarin vibes. And then it's got this beautiful like almond nougat thing happening. And but also like, what do you get?
Some florals as well.
Yeah, super floral and all of these caramels. So it's really exciting. Something I'd also like to introduce to you guys is something you can play with at home. I'm sure everybody has different types of mugs at home. And I think something that's really cool to share with people is how different the same coffee can taste in a different vessel, right? So this vessel is quite wide and has quite a thick lip. This one is enclosed. It's kind of like enclosed with a thinner lip.
Like a barrel.
Yeah. So the weight of the vessel, the size and the material of the vessel is going to actually alter the experience of the coffee. Typically, what you're going to find out of these enclosed ones, the aroma is going to really trap. Think about when you have a wine glass and a champagne glass, red wine. They all have different size chambers, almost you could call them. And they're going to enhance different parts of the coffee. So I really do love these kind of snug mug, they're called snug mugs here in Oz. I'm sure you can find them anywhere. They just feel good to hold. What they do is they really kind of concentrate that aroma, and you get a really powerful kind of hit of the coffee, but also a lot of texture. If I want to aim to taste a little bit more of the complexities of the coffee, I go for a wider lip. When I drink this, it kind of spreads all that coffee out onto my tongue in a very different way than the snug mug would. So that's kind of something you should experiment with at home, and then even do glass versus ceramic. You'll find so many differences, and maybe even find yourself your favorite mug that you want to drink coffee out of, and maybe think about it a little bit more too.
That's true.
What definitely tastes the worst is a takeaway cup. You should definitely always bring a keep cup.
Yeah, your keep cup.
If you have your own, and if you're making it at home, yeah, definitely don't buy takeaway cups. All right,
just to add one more thing as well. In terms of when you like taste and pretty much experience that coffee, what I recommend to you guys try that coffee around like the whole spectrum of the flavor in terms of the temperature. Sometimes when you taste that coffee and it's still hot, you can taste some tasty notes, I would say. And after it cools down, the flavor starts to change. Even texture sometimes get more thicker, like more sweet, more rounded. So try to enjoy the whole experience. I would say, that's the beauty about filter coffee as well. It's pretty much, lock yourself those 5-10 minutes just with the coffee. You're going to spend your time grinding that coffee. You're going to be focused 3 minutes doing those pours because it's very finicky at the same time. You have to nail those pours. You have to saturate all those coffee grounds to strike as even as you can. And at the same time, after you finish, after those 3 minutes, you want to enjoy that coffee. It's not that kind of coffee that you're going to smash, hit that caffeine, and get out like soy latte. It's a coffee that you're going to sit and enjoy. And also another very interesting thing, for example, normally for espresso, you use towards like 19, 21 grams of coffee. Pretty much the same amount of coffee that we're using here. But because this coffee stays in contact with the water for a very long time, kind of 2 minutes and 30, 3 minutes, you have way more caffeine because the caffeine is soluble in water. So you have 2 minutes and a half contact time between coffee and water versus 25 to 30 seconds coffee contact with the water in an espresso machine, for example. Of course, you grind your coffee finer, you have 9 bars in general pressure driving that water through that coffee pot, so you have more extraction, but at the end, you have more caffeine in your filter coffee. It's very interesting too.
I think we're ready for questions, aren't we?
Yeah, sure. I'll get some up for you.
No worries.
The first one is, what is the taste differences between immersion method and percolation method?
Percolation is kind of...
Would you want me to do it, or would you like to?
The percolation is the stovetop thing.
Yeah, it's also immersion.
Yeah, it's a kind of immersion as well. And to be honest, if you start thinking about like different ways to make coffee, at the end they all filtered. You have to filter that coffee. Even in espresso, you have a filter basket, it's a metal basket. So in your final cup, you have more oils, has more like textural experience, I would say, versus, for example, immersion filter coffee. After you pretty much strike that coffee over the water, you have to filter that coffee. You can use a paper filter. Even for Aeropress, you can buy like a metal filter. Probably with the metal filter, we give like more like close experience as the percolation method, for example. But for example, if you use the paper will retain a lot of oils and a lot of the kind of coarse and even finer because the little holes of the paper, they're way more finer than comparing with a metal filter. So you have more like a clean expression of the coffee.
So percolator would probably be a little bit more heavy.
Yeah,
have more of those natural oils, probably thicker as well.
Thicker. Yeah, and also because the ratio that you play with coffee and water, for example. For the Aeropress, I use the brew ratio maybe 1 to 11. So for each part of coffee, I use 11 times more water. Maybe for a percolation, you're going to use a way more concentrate ratio. Maybe 1 part of coffee for 3 or 4 parts of water. So it's going to be way more concentrate as well.
Nice.
Awesome. The next one is, what is the difference between a latte, a cappuccino, and a flat white?
That's a great question. That's a really awesome question. This is like one of those questions that everyone in the coffee industry is going to have a different opinion over. When I first started making coffee, the difference between a latte and a cappuccino was basically the vessel it was served in, right? Latte served in a glass, cappuccino served in that classic cup with chocolate on top. Original cappuccino actually didn't have chocolate on top, believe it or not. And then coming into a flat white, I used to believe it was also just a coffee with no froth on top. Now, something really interesting that ONA does, and what I was introduced to coffee, I thought it was very strange, but I'm finding that this is starting to become quite a popular thing, is now instead of offering people flat white, cappuccino, latte, we don't do that here in Canberra. What we do in our stores is offer people different blends and different experiences with the coffee, right? So where I started working, cupping room, we have 3 milk blends available every day. So we had a house blend, which was our Hitman. We had a seasonal blend, which is now Founder, and we have a coffee blend called Raspberry Candy. Now, what does that mean? They're just names, but if I was to explain them to a customer, what we're offering them is a different experience. All the milk coffees get made exactly the same. What we want to do is minimize the inconsistencies throughout the milk coffees. because if we're adding a little bit more milk or a little bit less froth, the ratio is going to be off every time. We want to add 120 grams of milk to approximately 36 to 40 ml of coffee, depending on the recipe for that day. What we really enjoy doing is giving people new experiences. So instead of asking for a flat white, we're going to ask you, do you want to try our house coffee, which is more of that classic chocolatey, caramelly, maybe a little bit nutty vibe, something you're really used to, or do you want to try something a little bit different, which will be our founder? That founder is going to have a little bit of that caramelly, a little bit of that berry vibe. Or do you want to try something really different, which is that raspberry candy? A really good story, beautiful story behind raspberry candy is that it was inspired by Sasha's winning WBC coffee, which is what he won the world championship on. It actually tasted like raspberry candy in Turkish Delight. I was like one of the very lucky people to actually try that coffee. It really changed my life. Raspberry candy is really got that like vanilla, ice creamy vibe, marshmallow, kind of strawberries. You can really smell it when you open the coffee. It's a completely different experience. So offering people, instead of flat white cappuccino latte, we're just going to look at different blends. Same with the black coffee, right? Having a filter option or espresso or a long black. Instead of just one blend, we have, some of our cafes have frozen coffee, which maybe next time you have us on, we can go a little bit deeper on. We looked at different farms, different countries, different even flavor profiles, depending on what we want to do. So there you go. That is kind of what we do, and the difference between them is kind of subjective. So to answer that question it's kind of up to you to decide that.
and also just in terms of the blends, we just mentioned about like the milk coffee, the blends designed for milk. So as the name suggests, a blend is a mix of different coffees. So sometimes you mix 2, 3, 4, 5 different coffees in that blend. So depending which kind of characteristics you expect in that cup. For example, you need body from the coffee, you need texture, you need flavor, but you're still adding the milk. So the coffee itself has to hold that character after you put the milk. And what Hani mentioned in terms of the ratio between coffee and milk is very important, because at the same time you want to experience that is a milk coffee, so you want to taste the milk and you still want to taste the characteristics of that coffee. For example, all those 3 blends, they have complete different coffees in the composition. For example, if you like the Hitman blend is 60% Brazilian coffee, 20% coffee from Papua New Guinea, 20% coffee from El Salvador. So depending what you want to achieve in that cup, you can choose which coffees you're going to use. For example, if you want to go for the opposite side, more like fruity side, like raspberry candy, as Hani mentioned, they blend 3 different Ethiopian coffees. They even use coffee that we call the carbonic maceration, which pretty much, I don't know if you guys watched the Sasha's movie as well, the Coffee Man. He explains a lot about the processing because it was the kind of coffee that he used in his competition. So that coffee will carry a very strong fruity character, very high texture and super fruity and vibrant. So the coffee, even if flat white latte or cappuccino, will taste completely different than a flat white latte or cappuccino made with a completely different blend like Hitman, for example.
Cool. Thanks, man.
ONA's coffee is amazing. How can I replicate your espresso drink without a coffee machine? Which brew method is suitable to make espresso?
Without an espresso machine?
Yeah, that's
a really good one.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say in terms of espresso, that actually coffee making, there is so many different methods that you can use, right? Even for example, they have one brand they call like Little Guy. It's kind of stovetop, but you have a handle. When you lock that handle, you have it's a kind of percolator. You have that extraction. It's gonna be very close to espresso. But to be honest, if you wanna experience like the espresso like expression of that coffee, for example, I would say you probably need an espresso machine.
You got to splash out.
Yeah. Even for example, you have machines we start like $200, for example, here in Australia, and they can go up to like $10,000, $11,000. I'm talking about home espresso machines. If you go for the commercial environment, you're gonna probably spend $20,000, $30,000 in an espresso machine. So it's very very expensive. And what makes that like so expensive as well is the craft behind to make that machine. A lot of machines they handmade, for example, they have plumbing, electronics, so they kind of complex structure. And you need that nice consistency and power for like espresso machine to be capable to drive that water through that coffee that you ground very fine, for example, to extract that maximum texture and sweetness for that coffee.
Thanks.
Yeah. My Aeropress brewed coffee didn't have a clear colour like the one that I brewed with another drip method. The colour usually is a bit more muddy. I'm wondering what the reason is for that.
Beautiful. Well, there could be a couple of reasons your Aeropress is a little bit muddy. You're never going to get a completely clear espresso unless you decide to run a V60 paper through it a couple of times. Because when you use an Aeropress, you are pressing, there's going to be fines coming through. You can see there's holes on the side. There's going to be ways for that fines to come through. For you to get it less muddy, less cloudy, the best things you can do is start to use a coarser grind size. And what you're going to also do is make sure you're using a paper filter. You can even double up on the paper filter as well, which means that you can kind of get like an extra layer of filtration, which will help you out a lot. There's also a bunch of modifications you can buy for the Aeropress that kind of clip onto the top, which might work out better for you. But the best option that I've found, I love making Aeropresses all the time. It's kind of just, I usually use one filter, but when I wet it, I really make sure it's nice and centered. And when I put the pressure down, I would not put any more pressure than 5 to 10 kilos of pressure. So if you want to measure that, you can get your scale that you weigh yourself on at home and you can press on top of it if you wanted to see how hard you're pressing. Or just press a little bit lighter and see how that turns out.
Yeah, even if you want to experiment or try something different, maybe you say, I have more clarity, for example, for my V60. You have your V60 paper. If you want, you can cut and use V60 paper, for example, in your Aeropress. You can always experiment. Sometimes you'll be surprised with the results that you can have as well.
Thanks, Ben.
What's the best pour-over coffee filter type?
Pour-over filter type.
Yeah.
Probably the one that we just made, right?
Yeah, I'm definitely not going to show you that's something that's not my favorite. My top two, maybe, if I was to say, I would say Metal V60, and I really love the Origami Dripper. And up there with the Origami Dripper are the Kalita Wave, and any flatbed brewers are really good as well. What I do find is my favorite about the Origami and V60 is the clarity and the complexity and the balance you get from these drippers just seem to be, for me, what I prefer and what I really like. You're going to have to find out what you like. That's kind of going to be the answer to that question, is test them. If I'm to show you how many drippers I have at home, you'd probably be concerned. I think I have almost every dripper under the sun because I just really enjoy experimenting and trialing them side by side. And if you're ever not sure, like, my favorite thing to do is if you can get 2 pairs of scales. They're not that expensive. Just kidding, they're a little bit. You know, we could do these two brew methods side by side with the same coffee, same water, same grind size. You're really going to start to really get into those levels of understanding more what you're getting out of your coffee, why you're getting it, and yeah, you're going to become a better brewer. The difference between Origami and the V60 is something someone asks me all the time. Ceramic Origami is going to have a little bit more heat retention, which is going to result in a little bit more texture, and it also has a little bit more brew power because it holds temperature for a bit longer. So that's why I kind of like them, and they're really pretty. That's another reason why I like them. Yeah, they're pretty cute. I kind of like them.
And also with the Origami, you can play with 2 different paper filters. You can use the normal V60 paper or the Kalita Wave paper filter as well. It has kind of flat bed, so you can still use those 2 papers and play with. Yep. You see, like, the drainage is completely different between those 2 papers as well.
Yep.
Nice presentation from you both. Just wanted to know, what's your favorite coffee bean from ONA for manual brewing? I'm assuming
the filter. Yeah.
Brewing, yeah.
Would you like to go first?
I'm going first. So from this rotation, I would say, because every like,
I didn't spill it. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I would say every 4 weeks we replace the whole range that we have for filters. So it gives to the people, like in the shops as well, more options, so more like different experience. It's kind of, you can build your database, try different coffees pretty much all the time. So the one that I like about this rotation was the Kenya Natural. So this coffee has kind of beautiful fruity quality, like black currant. And at the same time, the texture is so nice. It's so thick, so it's almost jelly. So it tastes like, it's kind of like that purple snake that you have that you can chew it.
I love purple snakes.
Yeah, it tastes like purple snake, black currant, and has this beautiful florality as well. So that's my pick of the week
Nice.
of the month.
Yeah. Well, there's so many beans that I really love, but let's talk about the ones that are available. So for my favorite pick for this month would definitely be the Fortuna Ecuador coffee.
That coffee stays here.
If you've ever had apple and blackcurrant juice, that's basically what this coffee replicates. It's so impressive to see these coffees. I'm not really too familiar with Ecuador coffees, believe it or not. It was the first year we kind of brought them in, and I've been nothing but surprised and inspired to explore more areas of coffee, origins. So that would definitely be my pick. If I'm talking in general, I personally like any of the natural carbonic maceration coffees we put out, or anything natural. They're just kind of bigger and they're bolder, and they're just kind of like, I just want to feel something, they hit you a little bit harder. So that's kind of would be my pick.
Yeah.
I think a little side note, I tried some barley coffee not too long ago, and I was very impressed. It was so beautiful. It was like raspberry jellies. It was so cool.
Not bad.
Final question. What can we do as brewers to maintain the consistency of our recipe?
That's a pretty good question. I would say practice definitely can bring perfection. So, for example, even we participate a lot of competition. So during competition time, you have people brewing coffee maybe like 5-6 hours a day. They maybe make every day they make over 50 brews, and they taste all of them. So it's pretty much try to create a link between your palate and your brain in terms of taste that coffee and try to understand what's happening in the cup. Is the acidity better than the previous cup? It's more rounded, the structure is more solid, the flavors are more clean and more refined. So you have to, I would say, plug and play, try different brew techniques, brew styles, and at the same time, probably having a scale will help you a lot, because you can measure pretty much all those parameters, like how much water you're using. Even more modern scales, you can have the water flow in your scale and check how fast you pour that coffee. So there's so many different ways that you can play with. But I would say definitely experiment and practice a lot.
Yeah, and probably just to add on to that, I think the best baristas and the best brewers are usually the most consistent ones. So the best way to get consistent is actually just doing repetition. And something that's a really good tool, you can actually film yourself if you want to film yourself brewing and see if there's any differences with the way you're pouring. And you also have a timeline, you can scratch the video and see a bunch of stuff. And the equipment is really important. If you buy the right equipment or the right tools for the job, you're always going to find that it's going to be more consistent. The less human error you can allow for, the more consistent you're going to be in the future. So, I really believe baristas shouldn't be afraid of automation and afraid of things that are starting to come out that are making coffee better but easier. There's always more to explore with manual brewing, but I think the future is going to be automation in our industry, which is, for me, I'm super excited. And it really just gives us as baristas and coffee lovers to more time to actually focus on, how things taste, but more importantly, the delivery, to the customer, the post-extraction variables, pretty much everything that happens after. We kind of touched on it with the cup you're serving, the temperature you're serving. So kind of really starting to think about controlling as many variables as possible is going to make you more consistent in the future. So I think we need to wrap this up. We've probably been going for too long, right? We're all right. But that's pretty much, that would be my advice. Cool?
Yeah. We're good.
Oh, hey.
Hey. That means
Hi,
that.
thank you
I
so
can't
much.
hear what you're saying, but thank you so much.
Thank you. No, thank
Thanks
you
so much, guys.
Hanny and Fabian. That was a fantastic masterclass. I know you can't hear me, but it was a fantastic masterclass. And now we all know how to make amazing coffee from home. I know I will be making coffee from home better every day now after watching today. So sekarang saatnya saya mengumumkan nama pemenangnya. Dan penanya yang beruntung adalah Dave Sipayong, Gilang Pramudhita, Just Rinaldi, Putri Wardhani, dan Adi Mumunk, dan juga Fauzan Gilman Fandi Ahmad, Ape Broto, Ingrid Patricia, dan Reza Anshari. Selamat, tim kami akan menghubungi
announce the winner,
kalian
I'll be like,
untuk
yay.
pengiriman hadiah. Oke, terima kasih. Sekarang Taste of Australia Coffee Masterclass bersama ONA Coffee sudah selesai. Jangan lewatkan acara Taste of Australia tahun depan dengan lebih banyak makanan Australia dan budaya makan Australia. Terima kasih semuanya. Sampai jumpa ya.
Bye
Thank you,
guys.
everyone.
Thanks for your time.
So,
Nice.
Nice. Not bad, eh?